John Lusk here of Lusk Archery Adventures. Series testing, successful hunting. I got a really cool broadhead that I'm super excited to test out here today. This is my first video of 2020. Woohoo! And this is a great broadhead to start everything off with. But first I want to thank you all for your incredible support in the last couple of years that I've had this channel. My base of subscribers has grown to over 12,500. Thank you for that. I have over 5 million views and it's just growing all the time. Thank you for commenting and encouraging and watching and sharing and subbing and liking. Please continue to do that. I've got like 115 different videos now. Please watch them all. You can just put it on autoplay and have it all play all the time. Okay, that would really help actually. And so thank you for your support. Thank you also for those of you who've sent broadheads into me to test. That helps a lot if you contribute in that way. And some have even hit the donation tab that's on my page there and donated some money because the testing gets really expensive. You wouldn't believe how much it is. And you notice that also for 2020, I've got these new shirts, okay? Teespring is a company that's associated with YouTube, a partner of YouTube. And once you have like 10,000 subscribers or something like that, they'll make shirts and mugs and stuff like that with your logo on them. So then they sell them like right below every one of your videos. So it would really support me as well if you hit that and buy a shirt. Okay, they're kind of cool. They're not too expensive. I get a little bit from it. And then on the back, it's got my tagline there. Okay, serious testing, successful hunting. So anyway, enough of that. Thank you. For this year, I've got so many incredible plans of what we're going to be doing. I got new ways that we're going to be testing things I'm going to talk about in a second. I've got a backlog of broadheads already lined up to be able to test, as well as I got some cool hunts planned. I'm going to Africa in February, my second trip to Africa, and this time it's to go after Cape Buffalo with my bow. Man, it's been like a lifelong dream of mine to be able to do that. Black Death on the dark continent. Okay, hoorah. Okay, I'm fired up about that. I'm sure I'll video it and hopefully that'll come out really well. But anyway, I'm going to get into the broadhead that I'm testing here today. And again, what a great one for the start of a new year. It is the Iron Will Wide. Dun, dun, dun. Iron Will Wide. Okay, the original Iron Will came out a few years ago, and it really took the archery industry by storm because it's an incredible broadhead. The guy who designed it, Bill, he's a friend of mine. I got to know him when I lived in Colorado. Great guy. He's also a teacher. He teaches mechanical engineering at University of Colorado, like an adjunct professor there or something like that. So he's a brilliant guy, great with materials and design, and he came out with the design. And one of the things that makes it so unique is the steel that it uses. They use A2 tool steel, which is a really incredible steel for a broadhead application. It's really especially great because one, it's super hard. It's got a Rockwell hardness of 60. Now sometimes when you get a Rockwell hardness that great, it's prone to having edge chatter or edge chipping when it has hard impacts. But not so with A2 because its resistance to impact is really fantastic. There's a scale called the Charpy V-notch score, okay, that it rates different types of steel based on how well they resist impact. And if you look at stainless, say if you compare this to typical stainless steel, this is 3 times more resistant to impact than stainless steel. If you compare it to S30V, like the Solid uses, the Solid Legend, it's a great steel. It's used in a lot of knife applications, but it tends to have a little bit of edge chatter. It's known for that in knives as well. That's better than stainless steel. However, A2, this A2, is 2.5 times more resistant to impact than S30V. So it's got that combination of being really hard and really tough. That makes it have a really sharp edge and it holds it really well. So beyond that, just the specifications of this are fantastic. You see me shoot it out to 100 plus yards in some of my tests. You see me stick it into cinder blocks and steel plates. And I mean, this thing is just a fantastic head. I've also taken a number of animals with it. I love this head. But I've had one small critique about it, and that is that its cut size. It's 1 1/16 inches wide. Okay, it does have bleeders 3/4 of an inch this way. So what that does in a good way is it maximizes penetration and it maximizes long-range flight. So it's great for that. But sometimes you want a bigger hole, okay? Sometimes you're not going to be shooting over 60 yards and you have no trouble getting a fixed blade broadhead to pass through an animal, but you want a bigger hole, and dun dun dun, that's where the wide comes in. The wide is 1 3/8 inch wide. I mean, look at the difference. 1 1/16 versus 1 3/8, and then the same bleeders, 3/4 of an inch that way. So this is one big cut. I've been wanting them to do this. I got these last fall and I've been testing them on animals and they've done really well, okay? Blood trails are a non-issue. I mean, they do really, really well, and they've held up really well in those animals that I've taken with them. So I'm excited to do some official testing now, and I'm gonna shoot them at longer range and see how they do at long range flights. And then I'm also going to test them through a new medium that I have. I'm always looking for like the perfect test for broadheads. You need something that's consistent, okay? Animals aren't consistent. I wish I had hundreds of animals that I could test the broadheads on, but even then, it doesn't allow there to be comparison in one broadhead to the next because the animals themselves vary so much in bone density and geometry and so forth. So I want a consistent medium that simulates an animal. And this year, what I'm going to be doing throughout the whole year is I'm using a multi-layered medium here. First, this is the first layer. It's a 1/2 inch of MDF surrounded by, in the front and the back, a 1/3 of an inch rubber foam mat. So that's like a bone surrounded by muscle tissue and hide. That's what that simulates. And then after that, it'll go through that and then go into this gel. And the gel I'm using is by a company called Clear Ballistics. And they make this ballistic gel. It's really awesome, okay? It's not cheap, but it's really awesome. Most gels, the gels that you make, okay, you have mixes, you get the gel mix and you make them, you have to keep them in the fridge, and even then they get moldy. Moldy and taking up a big chunk of space in the fridge do not go over really well with the wife. At least with my wife, it didn't go over really well. She put up with it, but she was glad when I got this kind. This kind you can keep at room temperature. I just keep it down here in the man cave, in the testing lab, and it just sits here and it's fine. It'll last forever like that. And then once you shoot it all up, you can melt it down and reuse it. And you can get a mold, and I got a mold so I can reuse this. You can do that apparently like 8 or 9 times before it starts to discolor a little bit. So with it being clear, I'm going to be able to measure accurately how far the broadhead penetrates into it. I'll be able to examine the wound channel, and especially if I'm using a single bevel or something where there's rotation, I'll be able to see that really clearly in this clear gel. So I'm excited to use that, and I'm going to be measuring the total depth of penetration and cross-referencing that with the total cut size to determine how much total tissue has been cut. So I'm going to tabulate this for each of the broadheads that I test throughout the year, and you can compare not just the ones I'm testing in each video, but you can compare all the broadheads that I'm testing in all the videos because I'm going to use the same medium. Then another thing that I'm using is to simulate bloodletting, because I'm always intrigued to think about, well, what will allow the best blood trail? And I know where you hit it makes the biggest difference, as well as, you know, the sharpness, the cut size, things like that. But a great way to measure it is a way that I've come up with that I'm calling the water bag test. Okay, I've used a water jug test in the past, and one of the viewers, one of you, pointed out, and I really appreciate it because I tested it and you were right, that when you do it multiple times, you get really differing results. And it's all based on the rigidity of the material. So sometimes when you shoot that jug, the plastic flap goes in or it comes out and the water really gushes out. Sometimes it springs back into place and it doesn't come out as fast. So because that's inconsistent, I've decided not to use that anymore. I don't trust it. So I'm going with a water bag, and I'm using a 1-gallon Ziploc bag. I'm filling it up with 10 cups of water and using food coloring so you can see it. And I'm measuring a line 4 inches from the bottom. And so I'm going to shoot in a consistent spot, and then I'm going to time how long it takes for the water to get down to the same line. So I'm going to do that with all the broadheads that I test, and that way hopefully we'll be able to have good comparative value in that throughout the year. And I'm going to do it multiple times each time I do it just to make sure it's being consistent. But in the tests I've done, the dry runs so far, it really has been consistent. So those are the tests that I have planned, and these are the first broadheads of 2020 to take these tests. So let's see how they do. I'm especially intrigued by the Iron Will Wide. So just to add my setup for all these tests, I'm using the Bishop FOC King arrow just because they're the best arrows that are made, and I'm really tough on arrows and they can handle it. And these are 460 grains total, And I'm using fobs. I've really been liking the fobs for the most part recently. They've done really well. You can watch my video about the test of those. I'm using nocturnal lighted nocks. They're my favorite. And I'm going to be shooting this out of my Bowtech SR6 on the comfort setting at 72 pounds. So that's my setup, and hopefully I'm going to stick with that throughout this year. So again, we have really good comparative value. First, we'll go with the iron wheel wide at 40 yards. Yep, that'll work. Now we'll go with the wide at 60 yards. I've got a balloon set up down there, so you're going to have to kind of look closely, maybe zoom in if you can, and watch the balloon pop. Bullseye. Now we're going to move it back to 80. And again, I've got a balloon set up down there, so you're going to have to look pretty closely, but let's see if we can do it. Oh yeah. Man, I'm really impressed with the flight of the wide here. I didn't expect it to be this good, especially at longer ranges. Now, I will say that it's not as forgiving and not as accurate, not as consistent as the original. With the original, I can pop balloons really readily and, even in a crosswind and so forth at all different ranges. With the wide, I've got to really pay attention to my form. And even then, they're a little bit touchy. So I'd feel a lot better taking shots with the wide under 60 yards. But you can see it can still work out to 80. But on an animal, I wouldn't shoot that far. I'd go with the original if I was going to be shooting past 60 yards. Here you can see the penetration into the gel. As expected, the original penetrated a bit more deeply. It measures 7 3/4 inches, and the wide penetrated 6.5 inches. The way I have the ruler set up there, you can't quite see it, but that was the actual penetration: 7 3/4 and 6.5. First, we'll go with the iron wheel original, and then we'll go with the wide. Now we'll test the wide. Here's a good way to see the difference in the hole size. Quite a significant difference. Of course, the wide on the left and the original on the right. Here's each of the heads after going through the MDF, of course, into the gel, and then also through a 22 gauge steel plate. As you can see, man, this A2 steel is it's just something. It's and the wide on the right again has gone through a couple deer, a raccoon skull with a raccoon in it, the raccoon skull, and a rabbit, and into the ground multiple times because of those things. So these heads are just amazingly resilient and resistant to impact. They hold an edge incredibly well. So what do you think about the iron wheel wide? Okay, I really like it. Man, I've been wanting this head, like I said, for a while, and I really like it. I've shot a number of animals with it. It's done a fantastic job on all of them. It is really flat out deadly. The cool thing is now you have a choice. And if you have a setup where you need to maximize penetration, or you're going after something really big and you need maximum penetration, or if you're shooting something at really long range, man, the original is the way to go. This thing flies like a dart and penetrates really deeply. You saw that in the test. But if you're shooting something under 60 yards, man, this head shoots plenty well under 60 yards, and man, it's going to make a really big cut if you have the kinetic energy to handle it. And this thing does penetrate really well, so it's not like you need like a boatload of kinetic energy. then man, this is your head. So you got something for any situation. Some people may want to consider putting both in their quiver. Say if you're like a Western hunter, maybe you have a really long shot, well then you can use this, like a follow-up shot or something, you shoot an antelope or something, you really want to maximize the distance, this is the way to go. But then if you got an animal closer, then this is the way to go. So you can carry both in your quiver and kind of be ready for anything. Great move, Iron Will, to come out with the wide and to keep the original. You got something for every hunter in every situation. Great job, Iron Will.